He fired her at 10:07 on a Saturday in February, in the middle of a service with 34 covers still seated and a lamb course on station for that had exactly 80 seconds left. He came through the back the way he always came, without announcement, without noise, but the kitchen registered it as wrong immediately. He had never come during service, not once in 14 months. Every person at every station understood this the way professional kitchens understand things. Not through information, but through the body, the way a room knows a temperature shift before anyone checks a thermometer. The only reason the rules changed was because something worse than the rules was already in motion. She was at the pass, plating the halibut. Her hands didn't stop. Jae-won's shin moved past the line without touching anything. He stopped 2 feet behind her. He was 35, Korean-American, composed in the way of a man for whom composure was not a style but a working condition. Tattoos visible at the collar, dark ink at the line of his jaw and the backs of his hands. He didn't lower his voice. He had never needed to lower his voice to be heard. "You're done." Effective immediately. The kitchen didn't stop. It couldn't. Not with 8 people and 34 covers and 4 courses still running. But something traveled through the room the way a current travels through still water. Invisible. Complete. Impossible to pull back once it moved. Every person at every station found something critical to look at on the far side of the room. She set the fish, drew the sauce in a single clean arc, set the brush down. Then she turned around. Amara Ellis was 32 years old, a black woman from South Jamaica, Queens, who had spent 11 years earning her place in every serious kitchen in New York through precision and an absolute refusal to compromise her standard for anyone. 1 Michelin star. Rebuilt twice before she was 30. She knew what zero looked like, and she knew the distance between zero and something real, and she had walked it before. She looked at Jae-won the way she looked at a poorly sourced ingredient. Complete clarity. No emotion she was willing to spend in front of 8 people watching from the corners of their vision. His face was controlled in the way of a man who had finished the decision before he walked through that door and was only here to close it out. Not angry, not apologetic. The face of someone who had done all the accounting alone in private and was now delivering the result. She held his eyes for 3 seconds. Then she turned back to the plate. She picked up the seasoning spoon. The lamb on station 4 hit its mark. David fired the next course without being told. The kitchen kept moving, because she had built it to keep moving. But every person in this room tracked her from the edge of their vision, the way you track something that has no precedent and no script. She tasted, adjusted, a half pinch of finishing salt, not a full pinch. The measurement lived in her fingers, not in any book. She reached for the microgreens, placed them, adjusted 1-2 millimeters towards center with the tip of the spoon. Stepped back. She looked at the plate. And the room, which had been pretending not to watch, stopped pretending. In 4 years working beside her, Nadia had never seen Amara Ellis look at a finished plate the way she looked at this one. To understand what she did at the pass on that Saturday in February, to understand why, you had to understand what cooking was to Amara Ellis. Not what it did for her, what it was. She had grown up in South Jamaica, Queens, youngest of 4, in a household where money arrived without pattern and left with certainty. Her grandmother ran the one constant thing in their lives, a kitchen where something was always on the stove, always exact, always right in a way that almost nothing else managed to be. Her grandmother cooked without recipes, without measurements, without hesitation, because 40 years of knowledge does not live in a book. It lives in the body, and it moves from the body into whatever you are making, and the result is always true. Amara learned to cook from the back of her grandmother's hip, watching hands that did not shake. Her grandmother had also run a small catering operation from that kitchen for 22 years. Church events, community gatherings, the kind of work that has no listing and no critic, just hundreds of people fed correctly, consistently, on time. When Amara was 13, the building was sold. 30 days notice. Her grandmother packed everything in 2 days and spent the next 12 months cooking from a church kitchen in exchange for use of the space. rebuilding her client list from nothing. She never discussed stopping. She went back to work. Amara had watched every day. She learned two things: that a kitchen could be taken, and that the knowledge in your hands could not. At 19, she enrolled in culinary school. At 21, she left, not because she had failed, but because she had the foundation and now needed the real education. Heat, pressure, the specific discipline of being the least regarded person in a professional kitchen and proving yourself correct about the food every day until the room had no choice but to acknowledge it. She worked every station in New York. First in and last out of every kitchen she entered for 4 years straight. She memorized sourcing networks, equipment tolerances, the exact moment a sauce breaks, and how many seconds you have to pull it back. She rebuilt twice before she was 30, once after a restaurant dispute, once after a landlord sold the building with 28 days' notice. She packed her knife roll in 40 minutes and was on the phone before she reached the sidewalk. Neither time did she consider doing anything else. At 29, she became head chef of a 12-table restaurant on the Lower East Side. She won the Michelin star 8 months later. The restaurant closed 6 months after that. Building sold. Again, and she started over, because that was the only thing she knew how to do when someone took the room. When Jae-won Shin's restaurant manager called, she was running egg station at a Midtown hotel brunch, performing at a level so far above what the room required that it was almost a private act of discipline. The terms were the only terms she had ever been offered that mattered. Full creative control, her own hiring decisions, a budget she had never seen, and one clause above all others: no interference with what happened in the kitchen. Her pass, her call, every decision made from what she believed in and nothing she didn't. She said yes before the manager finished. She built the kitchen from the ground up. Her team, her menu, her sourcing relationships, every system designed from what was true and working outward. The lamb dish, her signature, the one that eventually put the reservation line 3 weeks out. She developed alone on a Tuesday night in March, at the pass at midnight with a single test plate and a glass of Burgundy she forgot to drink. 14 months. Every single decision. She was not supposed to be anywhere near his world. But in October, he came through the back door for the first time, and everything she had kept carefully separate came into the same room. He came the first time on a Tuesday in October, 11:30 at night, through the back entrance like a man who owned the building and had never actually walked through it, which was exactly what he was. She was breaking down her station. The rest of the team had gone. He stopped in the center of the kitchen and looked at it the way she looked at rooms, measuring, cataloging, reading the structure of a thing before deciding what it was. The table at 9 had a problem with the lamb. She didn't look up. The lamb was correct. They didn't finish it. Then they ordered wrong. He stood there. She kept cleaning. He looked at the pass, the stations, the arrangement of every tool in exactly the position it needed to be for the person who used it. He came back Thursday. Same hour. He sat in the empty dining room with documents and didn't speak to her. She sent a plate through the pass, a sauce she was still working through, no explanation, and watched from the kitchen window. He ate it. He left. He didn't send a note. He came back the next night. By November, he was there every other evening, settled at the bar near the pass where he could see the kitchen without being inside it. She pretended not to notice. She always noticed. She knew the specific weight of his attention the way she knew the temperature of her kitchen by the sound of the ventilation, without looking, without thinking, just by being inside the room long enough. She started sending him her tests. The dishes she was working through that belonged to no one yet. Not on the menu, not finished, still being decided. She sent them without explanation and watched through the window. He always finished. He never sent anything back. He just came the next night. The night she sent him the personal one, built from her grandmother's kitchen in Queens, worked outward through her 11 years until it became something new but still entirely hers. He ate every bite. Set the fork down. Looked through the pass window directly at her. She was already looking back. Their eyes held for 4 seconds. Then she turned away first. But her hands, breaking down the station in the quiet after close, were not quite steady. He's here again. Nadia said one Wednesday, nodding toward the bar. I know. That's the 9th time this month. I know. He orders water and sits there for 2 hours. Just watches. Nadia looked at the bar, looked at Amara, made the decision not to say the rest of what she was going to say. This was one of the many reasons Amara had worked beside her for 4 years. Over 3 months, they built something neither of them named. She learned he ran things, significant things, the kind that didn't appear in public records, with the precision of a man who had not survived this long by being imprecise about anything. He learned she built dishes the way an architect builds structures, from the bones outward, nothing decorative, nothing that didn't carry weight. They were careful. She never asked questions she could tell he wasn't ready to answer. He never came into the kitchen without being invited. It was not simple, but it was real. And in both their worlds, real was the rarest thing there was. What neither of them knew was that someone had been in the dining room 3 nights a week for 6 weeks. Not eating, watching, taking photographs that would never produce a flash. And the file on J1's father's desk had been building for longer than either of them had been paying attention. Solomon put the folder on the desk on a Tuesday morning in the 2nd week of February. He didn't explain it. He set it down and stepped back and waited, the way Solomon always waited, without pressure, without expression, in the particular stillness of a man who understood that the information itself would do the work. Inside, photographs. The bar near the pass. J1 in profile, watching the kitchen. Amara at the pass window, a test plate in her hand, looking out. Both of them unaware of being seen, or aware and beyond caring. Which, Solomon didn't say, was the more dangerous version. His father called that evening. Park Sung-jin didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He spoke in the register of a man whose words had always carried their own consequences and never needed volume to enforce them. He said, civilian. He said, visible. He said, accessible inside your life far enough to be used against you. He said, there are families watching how you handle this transition. If they see something soft to press, they will press it. He said, end it. Cleanly. Now. J1 said the expected words. He ended the call. He sat at his desk for 2 hours. He ran the calculation the way his father had taught him to run every difficult calculation. Remove the emotion, identify the variables, assess the cost of each outcome. He had been doing this since he was 17. It had kept him alive in rooms where other men didn't survive their first mistake. The problem was that the calculation kept returning a number his framework wasn't built to hold. Every time he ran it, the value on her side came back higher than any liability should measure, higher than a risk, higher than anything in the model with a proper category. Not because he was making an error, because the framework itself had a gap and he had never needed to see it before now. He ran it again with harder assumptions. Same result. A third time, using only his father's logic, stripping everything else. Same. He sat with this for a long time. His mother had lost her restaurant when he was 19, a small Korean place in Flushing that she had run for 11 years, the actual business, the legitimate one, the thing that fed them alongside his father's operations. A rival family pressured the landlord. 20 days' notice. He had watched her pack the kitchen in a single afternoon, wrapping each piece of equipment in newspaper with the focused efficiency of a woman who had accepted the unacceptable and was not going to let anyone watch her break over it. She never reopened. That was the day he understood that power used wrong doesn't just end something. It erases it. He sat with this too. Then he picked up his phone. He called the restaurant. David answered. What time does service end Saturday? David was quiet for 2 seconds, the specific quiet of a person who understood that this question was not about service. Chef usually leaves between midnight and 1. He said carefully. I'll come at 10. He ended the call. He looked at the folder and then closed it and put it in the desk drawer. He didn't open it again. He knew exactly what Saturday would cost. He had known since Tuesday morning, when Solomon set that folder on his desk. He had been refusing to accept it since. He accepted it now, which was, in the end, the worst part. Saturday, February, 10:07 p.m. He came through the back the way he always came. The kitchen registered it wrong in the first second because he had never come during service, and every person at every station understood before he reached the pass that the only reason the rules changed tonight was because something worse than the rules was already here. She was plating the halibut. Her hands didn't stop. He walked past the line, stopped 2 feet behind her. The kitchen kept moving. It had to, but every person in this room had found something on the far side to look at. You're done. Effective immediately. She set the fish, drew the sauce, set the brush down, turned around, held his eyes for 3 seconds. Not asking, not waiting, reading. Then she turned back to the plate. She picked up the seasoning spoon. She had been making this dish for 14 months. Her hands knew it in the way that knowledge lives in the body after long enough. Not recalled, just known. She tasted, adjusted, a half pinch, not a full one. She reached for the microgreens, placed them, adjusted one with the tip of the spoon, 2 millimeters toward center. Stepped back. She looked at the plate, and she smiled. Not at him, not for the room, not performed, not calculated, not directed at anyone in this kitchen or the 34 covers in the dining room beyond the pass or the city pressing dark and indifferent against the windows. Just at the dish. The way you smile at a thing you have made that is exactly what you meant to make. When the work is true and your standard, which requires no audience and has never needed one, is completely satisfied. It was 4 seconds long. It was entirely private. It belonged to no one in this room. It belonged to her. She set the spoon down. She untied her apron from behind, folded it. Once, twice, with the same deliberateness she brought to everything she finished. She set it on the pass. Not thrown, not dropped. Folded, complete. A chef's apron does not stay in the kitchen. It travels home, gets washed, comes back. Setting it here, folded, meant something different. It meant she was finished rather than leaving. The distinction was architectural. She looked at David. Fire the lamb. His jaw was tight. He nodded. She picked up her knife roll from the shelf where it had lived for 14 months. She walked to the back door. At the threshold, she stopped, not hesitating, just standing inside the kitchen for 3 more seconds. In the last moments, it still belonged to her. And then she walked out into the February night, and the door closed, and she was gone. Inside, nobody moved. For full seconds. The ticket machine ran. The heat lamp stayed on. 34 people in the dining room continued through their Saturday evening without knowing what had just happened on the other side of the pass. Then J1 looked at the folded apron on the pass. He looked at the back door. He looked at the folded apron again. And he said the one word nobody in this kitchen had expected. David. David looked at him. The last plate she finished. His voice was controlled. Everything about him was controlled. But something underneath it was not. Bring it to me. David lifted the plate from the heat lamp, carried it to the bar near the pass, where J1 had sat for 3 months watching a kitchen that wasn't his. Set it down. Left without a word, because David understood when silence was the only appropriate thing. J1 sat. He picked up the fork. He took 1 bite. He set the fork down. It was completely, exactly right. It tasted like every decision she had made without compromise. Every Tuesday at midnight, she had stayed to refine something that already passed every standard except her own. That plate was the precise expression of 14 months of her. It was finished. It was perfect. It was the last one. He couldn't pick up the fork again. Solomon appeared at some point. J1 didn't know how long he had been sitting there. Solomon said nothing. Solomon always knew when words were the wrong tool, and simply stood by the wall and waited. After a long time, she left the apron. Yes, Solomon said. She folded it. Twice. On the pass. A chef's apron does not stay in the kitchen. It travels home at the end of every service. Folding it. Twice. Setting it on the pass as if completing a task rather than ending one, was the language of a person who had finished something, not abandoned it. He understood the distinction. He wasn't sure which one was harder to sit with. She didn't slam the door, J1 said. No. She didn't say anything. She told David to fire the lamb. He looked at the plate in front of him, at the single bite missing. At 14 months of her work that he couldn't bring himself to finish because finishing it would mean accepting it was over, and he had run the calculation 3 times and accepted it, and he still couldn't finish the plate. That's the most she said to anyone before she left, Solomon said. Fire the lamb. The service ran itself, because she had built it to run itself, and J1 stayed at the bar until midnight. He didn't move the plate. He didn't finish it. The dining room emptied. The kitchen broke down. David locked up without coming back to the bar, which was a kind of mercy. J1 drove through the city for 2 hours. Not toward anything. Just through it. The grid of Manhattan in February, the ordered streets and indifferent traffic lights, and the particular texture of New York at this hour, which had never once adjusted itself for anything anyone was carrying through it. He ended up on Barrow Street in the West Village at 2:14 in the morning. He had no reason to be on Barrow Street. He didn't know why he was there. He stopped. In a narrow building on the south side of the block, one light was on. Second floor, above a storefront with no sign yet. The specific warm quality of a kitchen light left on by someone who hadn't finished what they came to do. Behind the frosted glass, a shadow at a table. Someone sitting. Someone working. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time. Then he kept walking. She took the A train home at 1 in the morning with her knife roll across her knees. The car was nearly empty. The tunnel lights moved past in the rhythm of a city that had always been indifferent to what any specific person was carrying through it. She didn't let herself process what had happened until she was somewhere she controlled. She wasn't ready that night. She made tea, loose leaf, the kind her grandmother kept in a tin on the second shelf. She sat at her kitchen table and looked at her hands. They were steady. She noted this. She was grateful for it. She cried on day 6. A Sunday, alone in her apartment, in the middle of trying to write a new menu and finding that the sentences wouldn't come. It wasn't devastation. It was a clean accounting of a real loss, and she allowed it for 22 minutes. And then she washed her face and made coffee and sat back down at the table because that was what you did. She had built something real. It was taken. She was going to build something realer. By day 11, she had the space. A narrow building on Barrow Street in the West Village. Good bones. North-facing windows. A kitchen that needed work. She gutted it herself. Her team, her timeline, her calls, every decision made the way she made every decision, starting with what was true and working outward. Light first, then structure, then everything else. She named it Ellis. Just Ellis. Nadia looked at the sign. Just Ellis. Just Ellis. You couldn't have done 2 words? Something people could hold on to. Ellis is something people can hold on to. Nadia looked at the sign for another moment. Fine, she said. But I'm doing the reservation system. And she did, and it was excellent. And Amara didn't tell her this in so many words because she didn't need to. The soft opening was 6 weeks after she left. 28 covers. 5 courses that belonged entirely to her. No concept to serve. No investor's vision to maintain. No pass window with anyone watching from the bar. Just the food. Just the kitchen. Just what she knew. By the 3rd week, there was a 3-week wait list. One Tuesday, Nadia set her phone on the prep table without comment. A brief item from a culinary trade publication. A new scholarship program for aspiring chefs from underserved neighborhoods in Queens. Funding source anonymous. Administered through a nonprofit Amara had never heard of. She read it twice. Set the phone back down. Went back to her prep. She didn't say anything to Nadia. She didn't let herself say anything to herself either. She had read it twice. She stood at her own pass every service and watched her own dining room fill with people who had come specifically for her. Not for a building, not for a reservation, for her. And something settled into place that she realized, only now, had been loose for 14 months. She didn't let herself examine why. One Thursday during close, alone in the kitchen, her phone buzzed on the pass. Unknown New York number. She let it ring. After service, she checked it. Voicemail. 8 seconds. She pressed play. 8 seconds of breath. No words. Just someone breathing, steady, controlled. The breath of a person who had prepared something to say and found, when her voice came through the line, that every prepared word left them completely. Then the call ending. She played it again, and she knew, with the same certainty she knew when a dish was right, exactly whose breathing that was. She played it twice. Then she stood up, finished breaking down her station, and locked the restaurant. She was practical. She finished what she started. But 6 weeks of being certain she had made the right choice had cracked open in a single 8-second voicemail, and she didn't yet know what to do with what was on the other side of that crack. His side. He had walked past Ellis 3 times. Once at 7 in the evening when the dining room lights were on and the room was full, and he could see the movement of a service through the front window. Twice at 11 when the service had ended but the kitchen light was still on, and there was a shadow at the pass that he didn't allow himself to stand in front of for more than a few seconds. All 3 times he kept walking, at the exact pace of a man who had decided that showing up was not yet the right move. Solomon put the review on his desk 2 weeks after Ellis opened. Didn't explain it. Just set it there the way he set everything he believed needed to be seen. J1 read it once. Put it in the drawer. Took it back out twice before the end of the week. The order was Solomon's idea, though he didn't announce it as such. He handed J1 his phone one evening with Ellis's delivery page already open and said nothing. J1 looked at it, closed the phone, handed it back. Solomon accepted this without expression. The order was placed anyway. Thursday, 8:47 p.m. 1 portion. Chef's selection. Courier delivered it to the lobby. Solomon set it on the kitchen counter and left. J1 was finishing a call in the next room. He came into the kitchen and stopped. He could smell it from across the room. He had not known until this moment that he had memorized the smell of her cooking, filed it the way he filed everything his survival had ever depended on having available. The specific warmth of it. The thing underneath the seasoning that was not seasoning. That was knowledge, the particular intelligence of someone who understood at a cellular level what they were doing and why. He opened the bag. He opened the container. The lamb, finished to the same standard as the last plate she had made in his kitchen. Same finishing salt. Same arc of reduction. Same placement he had watched her make 100 times from the bar near the pass. He sat at the counter. He looked at the plate for 11 minutes. He didn't pick up a fork. Then he picked up his phone. He called Solomon. The delivery from Ellis. Find out if she's doing private dinners. Solomon was quiet for a moment. The specific quiet that meant. I have been waiting 6 weeks for exactly this phone call, and I am not going to say that out loud. She has a private dinner this Saturday, he said. Brooklyn Heights. 8 guests. How do you know? I know things. J1 looked at the untouched plate on his counter. At 11 minutes of a dish he couldn't eat. At the calculation he had run 3 times in February and the result he had accepted and the cost of that acceptance, sitting in front of him in a delivery container from a restaurant she had built without him in 6 weeks. Give me the address, he said. Solomon was quiet for one more moment. I already have it, he said. Saturday. After service. Saturday. Brooklyn Heights. 10:52 p.m. He came after the dinner ended. He understood enough to know that walking in during service would be a confrontation, and they had already had the only confrontation he had allowed himself, and this time was not going to work that way. The brownstone was on a quiet street 3 blocks from the promenade. The service entrance was propped open the way kitchen exits always are after a long service, for air, for the movement of equipment, for the ordinary necessities of a kitchen finishing its night. He went around to the back. He could hear it before he stepped in. Water running, the low movement of equipment, the specific sound of a kitchen coming down after a service it had held well. He stepped through the door. She was at the sink with her back to him, washing a cutting board with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times and would do it 10,000 more without it ever becoming less than complete. 2 members of her team were loading equipment cases on the far side of the kitchen. They saw him. They looked at each other. They looked at her back. She didn't turn around. He waited. He knew she had heard him enter. The room had changed when he came in, the way rooms always change when he entered them. He knew she was taking the seconds she needed, and he understood this completely, because he had taken those seconds himself before saying things he couldn't pull back, and he knew exactly what they cost and why they were necessary. She finished the board, set it on the rack. dried her hands on a clean towel, slowly, completely, every knuckle. She turned around. 8 weeks. She looked exactly as she always had. Contained. Precise. Entirely herself. Standing in a kitchen that belonged to her, wearing whites she owned, in a building where she was the reason anyone had come tonight. You're at my private dinner. The dinner's over. That doesn't answer what I said. He took the 3 seconds he needed. I ordered from Ellis on Thursday. Something moved across her face and was gone. Solomon. I couldn't eat it. Her team had found something requiring urgent attention near the far wall. Why couldn't you eat it? He held her gaze. Because it was the last plate you finished in my kitchen, and I fired you in front of 8 people. And you finished the dish anyway. He didn't look away. And then you smiled. Not at me. Not for anyone in that room. Just at the plate. A pause. I have been thinking about that smile for 6 weeks. And I don't have a calculation for it. The kitchen was completely still. Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at her team. Give us 5 minutes. They were out of the room in 20 seconds. She leaned back against the counter. Arms crossed. Chin up. The expression of a woman who had built something real without him and knew exactly what it had cost, and what it would cost again if it came to that, and had already made her peace with that number. 5 minutes, she said. Go. He didn't soften it. He said it the way he said everything that mattered, without decoration, without distance. My father identified you as a liability 6 weeks ago. He was correct that you were visible. He was wrong about the right response. A pause. And I made the calculation he trained me to make. And I let him be wrong. She said nothing. I told myself I was protecting the territory. The transition. I told myself it was the precise response for every variable in the problem. He looked at her directly. I removed the variable. I didn't understand that the variable was the only thing in the kitchen that mattered. Something moved in her face. Not softening. Assessment. The way she read a room with complicated bones, looking for what it actually was beneath the surface it was presenting. Your father, she said, retired 2 months ago. His reach ended then. So the reason you fired me no longer exists. That's one way to say it. It's the accurate way. She pushed off the counter, walked to her knife roll, and began rolling it closed, deliberate, unhurried. I know about the scholarship program. The culinary students in Queens. She tied off the roll and looked at him. I paid attention even when I didn't ask questions. He said nothing. I built Ellis. Every decision, every dish. I'm not closing it, and I'm not consulting anyone about what happens in my kitchen. I wouldn't ask that. You come to me, not to a restaurant you own. To mine. Yes. If anything from your world moves toward me, I know before it arrives. Not after. Yes. I rebuilt in 6 weeks. Alone. I will do it again without hesitation if I have to. That is not a warning. It is just true. I know, he said, not as reassurance, as the acknowledgement of something he had learned and would not unlearn. It landed differently than any apology could. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she set the knife roll back down. My team is outside. He waited. The equipment cases are heavy. She turned toward the back door. You can help load the van. There was nothing in her face. There was everything in her face. He took off his coat. Outside, Brooklyn was cold and indifferent. Her team watched J1 carry cases to the van without comment. They were professionals. They understood which things were not theirs to weigh in on. Solomon was parked at the end of the block, engine running. After the last case, Amara stood at the back of the van. Thursday, she said. What's Thursday? Ellis. 8 p.m. Our seat. View of the kitchen. She closed the van doors. Got in. Drove away. He stood on the sidewalk until the van turned the corner. Then he walked to Solomon's car. Solomon got out. Said nothing, because Solomon always knew the right amount. They drove back over the bridge. Manhattan came back into view, indifferent, enormous, loud. The way it had looked from his window 6 weeks ago when he stood there and felt the room go with her. Thursday, J1 said. I'll hold the seat, Solomon said. They crossed into Manhattan. Below, the East River. Above, the flat, gray-white February sky over a city that has seen everything and adjusted for none of it. Some things don't need a city to witness them. Some things just need two people who have finally stopped confusing the word correct with the word right. Thursday was 4 days away. He would be there at 7:50. If this story reached you, subscribe and turn on your notifications because the next one is already waiting. Drop a comment. Tell me which moment got you. Was it the smile she gave the plate, the dish he couldn't eat, or what she made him carry at the end? Because I need to know.